Dr. Jazz.
I've done this talk with so many guys that you played with, and this week also with Michelle, Rosewoman, and which is quite
Okay.
cool. She told me you're gonna play again with her in October, and I mean I want to touch that as well.
Yeah, it's kind of kind of a regrouping. I mean, we've done a lot in the past, many years ago, and then we both, had different projects that we pursued, and she actually was on my very first recording as a leader. So,
Oh, yeah.
So we go way back.
Yeah, she told me, like, especially, she connected with all you guys who were quite young back then. I'll put it like that.
Oh, yeah.
In the 80s,
That's true.
Yeah. But I want to start this talk first with the record you did with Taishan, Sorry, and which I absolutely love. It's just a burning record. So nice to hear you in this context. And how did you hook up with Taishan, and playing?
Well, we've been
actually,
well, the suggestion has been on the table for many years between the both of us, to do some kind of collaboration or do some kind of interesting project or something progressive. And he kept texting me and letting me know that the recording I did back in, I think, 1998, the live recording, Band in New York, was one of his all-time favorite recordings, and he played it a lot. And so I guess, we mutually decided to do something like that to give our own treatment, our own rendition of some standards, popular and obscure. And we recorded live and, combed over, the results. And so hence, that project was birthed. Very proud of it. I mean, just when you play with people of his caliber, that, there's no safety net. And there's none required because, he's got you. He's very orchestral, very colorful, very propulsive without stepping on your feet. So, there's no worries.
Yeah. Well, you always had that, right, with drummers. I mean, like when I look at your records, it's just like the drums seem to be always such an important point in your music. I mean, the rhythm, of course, but I wanted to also to ask you, like, I mean, my personal confession, like 20 years ago or something like that, when Inner Circle came out and I heard Interruption, man, I was just, that blew my mind away, that tune. And that album especially, with Eric Harland. And I went to transcribe stuff and did lead sheets, which after I saw your lead sheets on your website, I completely complicated everything. But what's happening. I wanted to start this talk with what's happening with you as a band leader, and are we? I know you did with Florian a record and with Taishan now, like lots of this collaborative stuff. But like, what's happening in the department of you, like as a band leader, or are you still writing new music and is something new coming up maybe? Or
I'm always writing. I mean, that's part of my daily regimen, documenting ideas and concepts and even little germs of thought, unresolved approaches, things that come to mind or things that I want to work out and figure out how they work and, how they can be utilized. Yeah. I haven't released a project under my own name as a leader, since 2008. Yeah. It's been 15 years. All kind of departures, all kind of, side projects, different involvements, teaching, producing, dabbling in real estate, all kind of things, even some, non-musical, involvements. But the demand has been so great, from both my students, current and former students, as well as fans. They bombard me every day on it. When are we going to see a new project? And it's always been on the back burner. So finally, in October this year, I've completed a project. I'm going to release it then.
Oh
And
man,
yeah,
what is it about?
yeah,
I mean,
you know,
can you
well,
share already?
it's a composer's recording, because I've done just about everything, different trio recordings with, recordings with strings, live recordings, larger ensembles, smaller ensembles, every type of configuration. But those hard burning recordings, where it's really long solos, and the songs are all 8, 9, 10 minutes long. I'm not interested in that. I'm really interested in development and atmosphere, environment, and putting myself in the middle of, a sonic portrait, something that really illustrates where my head is right now and how I've grown, and how I look at the world through music. For so long, for many years, I just became like really disenchanted with the music business. I became very discouraged, when I would go out to hear players, because I, like to hear a lot of live music, and there was such a sameness that I could almost predict what somebody would sound like when I've heard them warming up. I say, oh, I know what I'm in for. And things became very, very scholastic, very academic. It almost sounded like every gig was like an extension of a university jazz ensemble or a class.
Yeah.
And just the reference material that a lot of people would use seemed to be the same thing too. It's like all the saxophone players copied the same 2 or 3 guys. All of the pianists copied the same people. The guitarists, copied the same, and all the young drummers had the same way of approaching music. It wasn't as varied as a Philly Joe Jones and an Elvin Jones and a Roy Haynes and a Max Roach, and totally distinctive approaches. Just like the tenor players, back in the day, you would have Booker Irvin and Johnny Griffin and Dexter Gordon and Hank Mobley and Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and Stan Getz, and none of them sounded alike. So there was so much, sameness and similarities. I mean, I just kind of backed off and found other things to interest me. Meanwhile, still engaging in writing and composing and learning and moving forward.
Mm. Yeah, that's a nice description actually of of the musical.
However,
Yeah.
However, I do believe that we are in the midst of a renaissance. We're on the threshold of something new, because we are in the post-COVID era. And during the COVID lockdown, nobody could do any gigs. All they could do was stay home and study and practice and work on new things. And I've been hearing some things that people have since developed, and it's very, very encouraging. So I feel good now that people are kind of breaking free of the shackles of sameness. So I'm it's very, very, very encouraging. Yes.
Interesting point. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you actually. Yeah, it's what you mentioned. It's all the music is incredible. Like what everyone puts out, it's like 15/8, someone's playing 7 over in triplets, whatever, blah blah blah. The drummer is going over it, but it's just like it's so much of it is the same, in a sense. I mean, I quite got bored with many of the new records.
Yeah, I mean, people are playing very, very well. I mean, the level is very high, but they're using the same, materials, the same compounds, the same structures and things, and I was just waiting for somebody to break free of that, because people follow whatever's popular or whatever's new or whatever somebody does, and so now I'm seeing a change taking place.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, let's hope it will. It's funny because you put on some of the old records. Like I listened today, like to Gateway Trio, Dave Harland and Abercrombie, and
Sure.
Man, it sounds as fresh as ever, and I mean better, like 1976, and it's just funny how some of those things are still timeless. Well,
you think about that era, or you think about any era, pre, maybe 1995 or 2000 or whatever. See, back then there weren't many music schools or conservatories where people could study contemporary improvised music. So people were on their own. They were highly experimental. There were many more jam sessions, many more home sessions, and musicians got together and talked about music and exchanged ideas, more readily. And so with the the explosion of all of these conservatories and the codifying of music means, of course, you're going to have this storied, cliched assembly line idea of how music is constructed. And so you have a lot of people, graduating with degrees sounding the same because they had the same teachers, the teachers studied the same people, and you have to abide by that or you won't get a good grade. So that's why the music back then sounded different, because people were just, acting upon their own impulses and think and sets of inspiration. Mm-hmm. I think we're getting back to that. I really feel it.
Yeah. I mean that's a good point. Like, because when I look at your generation or the people you played with, it's you, Steve Coleman, I don't know, the horn players, Gary Thomas, Branford, like all you guys sounded already back then so original, which is, let's talk about mid 80s, right? Like, yeah. And so basically you came out and you sounded original. I mean, Michelle told me also that, like, you were 23 or 22 and you were basically already then, you had your language. And
well, see, we had the advantage of, and I think that we were probably the last generation of people to benefit from this. We had the advantage of playing with elders, who were still on the scene. They were still alive. They could be seen in the clubs in New York every night, actively scouting for new young players. So we were able to be apprentices, to go on the road, with these players who made wonderful contributions to music. Many of them innovators themselves. And so after that, after our generation, came another, legion of so-called young lions, as they called it, who didn't play with anybody. They got record deals just because they could play. And that changed things. And then the generation after that really didn't play with anybody. They were school musicians, And so the music, it changes. I won't say it gets worse. It just changes, and we have to accept change.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, especially about you, coming from St. Louis, and what was like your trigger, or let's say learning process when you were a teenager, I guess mid-70s, before moving to New York? What did you transcribe? Like, what did you listen to? And I mean, there was an abundance of incredible music out there, but like, what was your first impetus actually that you decided, like, shit, I want to do this? And
well, in the beginning, of course, it was R&B and blues players, because I was a kid playing in these soul bands, these funk bands, blues bands. I was young, and all of the people that surrounded me were in their 30s and 40s. They were elders, and they protected me and they guided me, towards some things to check out. So I had, very good strategic guidance. But I always recognized that there was something more. There was another way to express myself on the instrument. I always felt like, I felt bound by limitations. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't all there is, So, I mean, in 1976, I got a vinyl from guitarist Kelvin Bell, who was also in the same funk band that I was. And he said, man, check this out. You have, very good fingers. You have a good ear. You have a good sound, And so it was a Charlie Parker record. It was a live recording. And I didn't understand any of it, but I picked up, a lot of the material from the record by ear. I had no idea technically or thematically or intellectually what was going on, but I absorbed a lot of it. And so my playing started to change. It started to, to metamorphose based upon, because, I was like a sponge and eager, to learn and eager to say, wow, let me get that. Then I got some Cannonball Adderley records. Then I got some Sonny Stitt records, So those were the three alto saxophone players who really informed, my early vocabulary. So I had the vocabulary, but I still didn't have, the theoretical knowledge. So it's kind of interesting that I put that before, realizing what it was.
Maybe that's better.
So in 1978, I got a scholarship to go to Howard University in Washington, D.C. On the very first day, when we were doing evaluations for the ensembles, I walk into the room and there was Wallace Roney,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Gary Thomas, and pianist Jerry Allen. So I met them all at the very same time. And so, we were all at that school, and, we, helped each other. And Gary and I, we became very close because we shared a practice room, and we transcribed a whole lot of solos, and not just saxophone solos, but vibraphone solos, Bobby Hutcherson, trumpet solos, Clifford Brown, and, and Freddie Hubbard, and whatever we could get our hands on. It was kind of a greedy, voracious appetite, for, the ingestion of all this information, because it was all new. And every discovery was exciting. It was like a step forward. And incidentally, the practice room next to ours, Wallace Roney was there. Now, Wallace was the same age, but he was, ahead of us. He knew music, he knew harmony and theory. So he called me over and wrote out some chord changes and kind of detailed to me how resolution worked and how progression worked. Because he said, you're doing it, but there are a lot of mistakes. So I realized that you're just going on instinct. And he was right. So when he told me what it was, and I could see it, from the explanation of a peer and not a teacher, there was no pressure to get a grade. It was just my friend telling me. And I said, wow, my eyes got big, and that just set off the whole trajectory. I mean, it was like jumping, off a springboard. And I just went transcribe crazy. I transcribed maybe 2 or 3 solos every day. Wow. And this is with a cassette player. So you can imagine, I broke a lot of cassette tapes, rewinding, going back and forth. But, I had a whole stack of handwritten, there were no computers, there was nothing digital. So you had to do everything by hand. Or if you had a turntable, I scratched up a lot of really good vinyl, putting the needle back, transcribing things. And it just became a mission. And in a very short time, I, accelerated, and I just skipped, a lot of levels because I was nonstop, almost didn't sleep, slept very few hours every night. Sometimes I slept in the practice room. I didn't even go back to my apartment. And then a couple of years after that, I got a scholarship to go to school in Boston, where I met a whole new set of young people who inspired me, and, moved to New York a couple of years after that. So it's, things happen very fast for a person who's interested and who has the enthusiasm and who has the aptitude, which is why now I won't say I'm against schools, but I don't see school as the best environment for somebody who wants to learn. I think apprenticeship, one-on-one, or like a very small group where there's a lot of verbal exchange and a lot of experimentation and an exceptional amount of jamming, because you can't just be on the blackboard. You have to put things to the test. You have to apply them, and you have to record yourself and listen back to see if they work or not. And then you have to correct the mistakes, and it's hands-on. It just can't be academic. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in a classroom with 20 people, and the teacher's talking too fast, and you didn't get it, and then you get a bad grade, that's very discouraging, because you need some some special attention, or you need a better explanation. So I don't know if getting grades and dealing with people in a classroom who are at varying levels of proficiency is the best environment, because you might do better with somebody who's more patient with you.
Or like you said, like transcribing. I mean, I'm self-taught. I had some lessons, but like I transcribed. I want to ask you about the transcriptions, because I transcribed, I think, like 1,000 solos still by hand, by everyone, including yourself and Steve Coleman. But that stuff was too fast for me to play. So I picked up some phrases, and then I learned those phrases because it was just too much. But I was exposed to the language. And did you like learn all those solos like to play them, or just basically just transcribe them?
I would learn them by ear first.
Okay.
And then I would write them out so I could put the analysis, and I could highlight things that were of particular interest to me, because I wasn't interested in playing the solo on a gig, but I wanted to learn how things work and how people approach things. So if there was a song that I was trying to learn, say for instance, All the Things You Are, I would transcribe Charlie Parker playing it, then Lee Konitz, then Sonny Stitt, and Cannonball Adderley, and everybody. And I would see what they would do, at particular junctures, turnarounds and the bridge and how they resolve things, so I could compare. And I say, so then I would have options. Okay, so I'm going to do this, the Stitt, turnaround this time. Okay, now I'm going to do the Jackie McLean thing. Now I'm going to do the Lou Donaldson. So I think it's really good, for comparison and extraction.
Yeah.
And that way, you can execute the things far more readily than trying to memorize a whole solo, and that slows down the response, and I don't think that's that's very, very, very fruitful.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, I would take maybe a 4-bar snippet of a solo, like something really, really interesting to me, a really cool line, and I would transcribe that line in 12 keys.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I would make exercises out of that, and then I would start to play variations on that, and that would teach me how to alter things, with successive choruses. And so each solo was an entire lesson for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just want to hear your talk. I find it so beautiful, because how much love and work actually goes into something. I mean, like you put, and you do it because you did it, because you loved it, and you wanted to learn. It's so nice to hear this. But I wanted to ask you about New York City when you came in the early '80s. How was that like for you? I mean, your generation, then basically all the players you mentioned basically came to New York, and but in the beginning, you started to play with Jack, right? How did this story with Jack begin, or was it what was before?
Well, in the very beginning, I did some gigs with Dizzy Gillespie. I mean, that's really what made me go to New York. And then I was playing with his protege, John Faddis. I was playing with John Faddis's band, which included James Williams on piano, Anthony Cox on bass, and Kenny Washington on drums, who was succeeded by Ralph Peterson. So I was with him, and I was, playing around, New York, and hitting all the jam sessions. There were a lot of jam sessions. See, this is the thing, so every night you could bounce around to different clubs. You could see who the new person was in town, who was hot, who was not, and you could record yourself, because Sony Walkmans were kind of a new thing.
Yeah.
So you could record and go back and listen to your mistakes, and then you can make corrections, but in all of these jam sessions and all of the clubs, they would let the musicians come in for free. If you had a case, or if they knew you can come in for free at the last set, and you can up close see these great people play. Joe Henderson and Tommy Flanagan and Art Blakey and McCoy Tyner, and all these. It was just amazing. And then you go to the after hours clubs, and they would be sitting right there. They would be sitting. Betty Carter would be there every night. Elvin Jones, Art Blakey. It was just amazing. Just to be within arm's reach of these people, and you have dozens of their recordings, and they were scouting for young people. So that was more incentive for us to to get better, because we might get the gig with somebody we idolized, and apartments were very cheap in Brooklyn. The rent was very cheap, so a lot of people moved to Brooklyn, and we had jam sessions at our respective apartments. So there was always a session every day. Some people worked day jobs. Some people had gigs with but. I think in my third apartment in Brooklyn, drummer Terry Lynn Carrington, she moved in. There was another space. We were roommates, and she was playing with everybody. She was playing with Stan Getz and Joe Sample and Wayne Shorter and Clark Terry and Herbie Hancock and Dave Sanborn. She was playing with everybody. So she was never there. So it was almost like I had an apartment to myself. But she was a protege of Jack DeJohnette. Yeah. She would go to his house on the weekends and whatever. She told him about me. And so I was playing at the Vanguard with somebody. I don't really recall who I was playing with. But the sets were staggered. So in between sets, you could run to another club and check out a couple tunes and then run back to the club. So Jack was playing at a club in the Village. The club was called Lush Life. It was owned by the same people who own Sweet Basil, that T-shirt you have on the back. They own Lush Life.
I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so Jack was playing trio. He put out a trio recording of him playing piano. So he was playing piano. And Eddie Gomez was playing bass. And Nasheed Waite's father, Freddie Waite, was playing drums. Yeah. So I ran over there and I sat in. I played one tune. And Jack said, "Oh man, you sound great, man." So if you want, you got the gig. And so it was just that easy.
Wow, fuck. Yeah.
I went and played one tune, one solo, and he said, "You got the gig if you want," because David Murray was playing with him, and David was leaving because he was, becoming more busy as a leader, and so that's how that happened. And I also played with a whole bunch of other great leaders and other great icons, and you get a reputation, if you can take care of business and they like what you're doing, but one bad performance could be the end of your reputation. That's why it was really important to stay at the top of your game. If you go to a jam session and you step up there to take a solo and you don't know the tune and you can't hear it, and man, that'll spread around New York like wildfire. People say, "Oh man, I heard Greg Osby last night. He sounded terrible." So that's why everybody, stayed sharp. And, I would go to these sessions and, Steve Coleman would be there, Donald Harrison would be there, Kenny Garrett would be there. And, it was a really good community of musicians, talking about music and, what are you working on? Let's get together. Or you might call somebody on the phone and those phone calls would last for 4 or 5 hours because, you putting, the phone to the speaker, "Man, check out this solo, man, check out this Sunday Stitt solo," or, check out this Von Freeman solo, and whatever. So it was a great deal of enthusiasm and a great deal of camaraderie and a lot of exchange. So, I really, I just love, that atmosphere. Yeah. Now, when you're in school, it's different because it's competitive. People are trying to be the best. I play faster. I play louder. I play more, complicated. And that's a different kind of energy as opposed to, "Hey man, show me what you're working on." "Oh yeah, okay, let's get together." I like the exchange energy more so than the combative, competitive, academic energy. And that's the feeling that you get in conservatories and in universities is, "I'm better than you." I never cared about who was better. All I want to know is, can you tell me a good story, a good musical story that I can remember when I leave? I want a takeaway. I want something, to take home with me, not just a whole barrage of notes and somebody playing crazy and sweating. And, I'm not interested in. I'm interested in a logical, thematic, theoretical, beautiful, organic story.
How much when you played with Jack? I mean, always when I watched him live with his bands, he seemed to have like that arc of a concert, of an album. Like, what did you learn with Jack and touring, I guess, in Europe and everywhere, of course? Like, how was he with you guys? I mean,
I was with Jack from 1985 until maybe 1992.
Oh, wow. That's a long one. Okay.
And playing with Jack, as well as with, any other established elder, you get a firsthand view of how they interact with promoters, booking agents, the audience, fans, record companies. So that's a whole nother education that you can't get in the school. That's why it's great to be around older people who can show you the ropes, because if you just surround yourself with your peers, technically you're just going to be stepping on each other's feet until you get it right. There'll be a lot more mistakes than if you observe, And so, I saw Jack artfully and strategically diffuse a lot of crazy situations that could have, for instance, we would go to an airport and we would get there and they would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, the flight is overbooked. We're booking you all on another flight, or you have to fly out tomorrow." Now, some people would just explode and start shouting and screaming, and it'd just be terrible. But Jack would, well, I understand how that works, but see, we have a concert. The concert is sold out. People have already paid their money. The money is non-refundable. There's going to be a lot of angry people, angry at me. They're going to be angry at the promoter. It's just going to be bad overall, and they're going to be angry at the airline. So ultimately, you all will lose a lot more money than if you just give us, our 5 seats. And so miraculously, the seats would appear.
Yeah.
We would get on the flight, and it happened every time. Because he would also say, oh, by the way, here's my new CD, compliments, here's my new, so it would always be, just this way of smoothing over a potentially, volatile situation. That, as well as talking to the audience with respect, being respectful to people, who want a photograph or who want an autograph, always giving them your time, because these people are the reason, that you're here. You can't be rude. You have to be, grateful. The same thing, traveling with Jim Hall or Andrew Hill or Herbie Hancock, they were always very gracious. Anybody Freddie Hubbard, Woody Shaw, McCoy Tain, anybody I was on tour with, I just saw just majestic, this aura of beauty, in their spirit, and how they, interacted with people. So it's very, very important.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I love those records, by the way, with Andrew you did, and Jim, of course. I mean, being a guitarist,
I learned a lot from all of those people. Different things. Of course, Jack, has this concept. He calls it a multi-directional concept, where he's pulling from various resources and stuff, and you really don't know where his music is coming from, because it may sound a little bit Brazilian, it may sound a little bit Cuban, it may sound, like some different type of structures. And I like that. I like something that's not readily identifiable, because you can't blame it for being a copy of anything, because it's all things or none of them. Exactly. Andrew had this very, very personalized, very cryptic way of composing. And then you look at his charts, and then the way he would interpret them. So you kind of had to get inside, the way he talked, the way he walked, the way he lived. I mean, his music was a very, very distinctive mirror of his personality, and so very, very true to form. Jim was a master of color and shading and tempo. And so, he didn't like to play really loud, so he was really, really into dynamics and embracing every note. There was nothing went to waste. I mean, every note, he may play all quarter notes, and each quarter note sounded like the greatest thing you ever heard. He was very concerned with tone and delivery and being not conservative, but not wasting, not playing anything that was superfluous or extra, that was disposable. Everything meant something, and everything was deliberate, and it's on purpose.
Yeah. How did you connect with Jim, by the way? I mean, I wanted to ask you that, because it would not be like on a first choice that when I saw that you did the records with him. I'm like, man, with Jim Hall, wow, that's amazing, and you two seem to have blended, like it was like this, like.
Well, according to him, he said that he was driving in the car with his wife, and one of my recordings came on the radio. It was a recording of me playing, I think "Don't Explain," or some standard. It was a ballad. Featured on I think a 1995 release, 95 or 96. It was called Art Forum on the Blue Note label. Yeah. And he just couldn't he didn't know who it was. He said it sounded like a current recording, but it sounded like an older player. But then when I started to play a little more, he could tell that the content, he could tell that it wasn't an older player, but it still had
That's
the trappings of somebody who listened to, historical recordings, who knew their history. So he found out who it was, and he contacted the people at Blue Note, and then they told me, and then I called him, and then he said, "Yeah, I really enjoyed your playing. I'd never heard anybody of your generation embrace, a ballad that way. You took your time, and you really nurtured, and so." And then we established a really good rapport. I went to his place, and then we just played duo.
Oh man, beautiful!
And he was like, yeah, just exclaiming, "Oh, I like that! I like, ooh, yeah, that kind of thing." And that might have been around 1995 or so, 90, 95, 96. We had a very, very long relationship, and he would just call me out of the blue, and we would have like these 3-hour conversations. He would tell me stories about, Ben Webster or Jimmy Jufrey or Stan Getz, all kind of stuff that you can't find in any history book, or you can't find in school. Once again, that's why it's important to hang out with people who knew these people, who contributed with these people, who toured with these people, who record with these people. Then you can get the truth. The unaltered, the unembellished truth. And so, and I encourage all young players, to make an anonymous phone call, make a cold call, and just call someone and say, and introduce yourself. I'm so and so and so, so you don't know me, but if you could, and just do an interview like this, people call me all the time. They email me, or I meet them on FaceTime or online some kind of way, and I try to give my time to people because I know they need it. I've had a lot of experiences that they never will have. Yeah. I've met a lot of people that they never will meet, and I've gotten stories passed down to me that aren't written. So it's really important to be the mediator, to pass the baton, and to be the bridge between generations. And now I represent that generation. I mean, I have a birthday next week, I'll be 63 years old. Wow. And so now, I'm of the generation of the people. I mean, they were of this generation when I came to New York. So I have to make myself available. I mean, I'm obligated to do so. That's the only way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, did you? I was last year on tour, right, with Bob Moses and Ariel Anderson, and those guys are like 76, 7.
Right.
And it's kind of. I wanted to ask you something about touring with the elders, and I kind of didn't want to directly ask them some things, but then like twice in the evening we came to the hotel and drank some wine, and those guys started to tell stories like, when I was with Mingus, or when I was with Eric Dolphy came there and played, Bob Moses was telling, and then I was just like a small kid they're like listening. Ariel was like, but check this out, Sonny Rollins came on tour, and blah, blah, blah. And like, did you then directly ask like Andrew or Herbie, or did they just start telling these stories on themselves? I mean, this is something I regret sometimes when touring with the others.
Well, I have a story. I mean, in the very beginning, I didn't ask anybody anything because I felt honored to be in their presence, and I didn't want to violate that privilege by trying to extract something that they may or may not have wanted to talk about. So one of my very first tours with Dizzy, we did the concert, and then that morning we came down to breakfast, and so I'm sitting at the table. So here I am. I'm in my early 20s. I might have been maybe 23 years old, Wow. And James Moody is there, Ray Brown is there. So then up comes Jimmy Heath, Percy Heath, and Tootie Heath, the Heath brothers. So they're sitting there, and they're all telling these stories, right? So then Oscar Peterson walks by, he says, "Hey man, so and Ella Fitzgerald, she was still alive, so so I can't believe it, and so they sit there and they're telling stories and telling jokes all the way from breakfast all the way past lunch, and I'm just sitting there. I didn't say anything. So as we were getting into the bus to go from, I think from The Hague, maybe to Rotterdam or something like that. And Dizzy says to me, "Say, hey, Gregory, how come you didn't say anything? You sat there the whole time, you didn't say anything, and blah, blah, blah." And I said, I didn't want to say anything stupid. I just wanted to just absorb all the stuff. And so he said something to me that was very, very profound, and that changed my life. He said, there's no such thing as a stupid question. He said, the only stupid question is a question that you fail to ask. Yeah. He said, because we'll never probably get together like that ever again. And shortly after, some people started to check out. They weren't around anymore. So when he told me that just opened, the floodgates, so to speak. And anybody that I saw, I just asked them a million questions. And I asked them, could I record it or could I write down the answer? So, I basically interviewed anybody of interest. Even peers, not even elders, but I mean, I would talk to, Mulgrew Miller or Jerry Allen or Kenny Kirkland or anybody. So it didn't matter, if they were older or younger. If they had information, if they did an interesting recording or there was an interesting gig or composition that I didn't really understand, I would basically just corner them and just ask questions. And somewhere I may even have it was like a 10 question chart. I would kind of ask people the same thing, like the same 10 questions, and I would compare their answers. So Dizzy kind of gave me license to not be shy. That's important. He said the only stupid question is a question that you didn't ask when the opportunity was there, because being silent, you just miss all of this information. Sure. Yeah. So I mean, and so I think a lot of those people they kind of gauge your level of sincerity and your conviction and how serious you are. So then they open up. But if they just think you're like, some young kid who wants to be famous or wants to make a lot of money or wants to be killing, well, then they don't talk, because they just said that, you're just like some stupid kid, but if they see that you're serious and they see you incrementally getting better and you applying the things that they tell you about, they say, oh, okay, he's serious. So then they kind of embrace you and they, take you under their wing, and they'll tell you some things that, you would never get anywhere. Sometimes they tell you some things that they shouldn't. They tell you some crazy stories that you can't repeat, but it still gives you an illustration of where they're coming from, their personality, their relationships with other people. It's great. It's just like a living biography.
Yeah. It's such a nice community. I mean, then once you get to know it, and it's so beautiful. Yeah, especially these stories. I mean, I love that. It's that's why I love doing these talks. During COVID, just to hear you guys. You've done. I mean, even younger and older than you. Like, just to keep this flow of information for me personally. But to share it also, of course. But I mean, it's all about the music is there when we talk also. I mean, beside the music, sure. but when you were touring with Jack, I wanted to ask you this. You've done like so many albums and written so much music. How did the first album, Sound Theater, happen actually? And you becoming a band leader, and how did that story begin for you? I mean,
yeah. Well, I actually led bands from the very beginning when I came to New York. Locally around town. Sometimes door gigs. Sometimes I would play for free, just to be in it, to be doing it. And, we would go around to different bars, and they didn't have any music at all. They just had televisions, those big televisions up on the wall, on mute. And I would just ask them, say, listen, if you can move those tables out of the corner, can I bring my band in here on a Wednesday or Thursday night, a slow night? And, you don't have to pay us. I mean, we can, we just do it. Then they would just get a bigger crowd, because most of the times those places would be empty. So they would realize, wow, you're bringing business. They would do well at the bar. So then after that, we would have splits. We'd like split the door, or we would get the door 100%. And some of those places still have music now, and they didn't have music before we started. So we started music in a lot of little clubs around, Brooklyn, and so being a part of this whole first wave of the Young Lions, I don't know where that name came from. Record companies were looking for younger players to sign them. This was the beginning of Winton and Branford and Kenny Garrett and Donald Harrison and Terrence Blanchard, Lee Wallace, Roney, Steve Coleman, Jerry Al, a lot of people, So they were looking to sign people, and some people, signed those record deals. I wanted to wait because I just didn't feel that I was worthy to be documenting a record yet. And, I'm like, man, I'm only like 23, 22 years old. Nobody wants to hear me play a love song or a ballad or whatever. I need to have 10 more girlfriends first, so I can be authentic. I don't want to hear some kid play the blues. What does a kid know about the blues? He can play a blues, but he's not playing the blues because he doesn't know the blues, So that was just my thing. And, interestingly enough, some people, they signed record deals and they got dropped because they didn't sell any records because they didn't sound authentic. They sounded young. So I waited until I was 27 to do a recording with a German label, JMT, that was distributed internationally by Polygram. So we had, global distribution, but we still had the independence. And the idea was, we just do whatever we want to do, and then they would put it out. There was no A&R person or some producer telling us what direction, because they came to us to do what we do. And that was the best situation for me. I was already playing with Jack, so this was 1987. I was playing with Jack, from 1985. And back then, Japan was, a common destination. We would go to Japan, 2, 3, 4 times a year, maybe, doing various things because the economy was great and the US dollar was strong. So I was very influenced by Japanese culture, and in particular, Japanese culture and cinema. So Steve Coleman and I would watch these old samurai movies in black and white and with subtitles, and we would like really get into it. And then I got into Japanese cooking, and I even, had my apartment, decorated with Japanese, it just looked like a Japanese house, it had the robes and everything. And so it was the whole thing. I was kind of infatuated with that. So naturally, my first recording is going to have some Japanese, components. I had, I played some Japanese folk songs, some children's songs, and I interpreted those. I got a renowned Japanese koto player, a Fusako Yoshida. So she played koto, and I had a lyricist, Haruka Nara, and she transcribed a poem that I did, and she narrated that. And so it kind of had these overtones, that feeling. And I wanted to put myself inside that. And that's kind of a running theme for all of my recordings. I don't want them to repeat whatever preceded it. I don't want, this CD to sound like the one that I did, a year ago. And I don't want the 2 CDs from now to sound like anything I did before. I think that's to the detriment of your artistry, because it doesn't really give a snapshot of where your head is now. If you're doing the same thing, maybe that is where some people's head is. Maybe their head never changes. Maybe they never grow, and they just do the same thing. And the only thing that changes is the title of the CD. They have the same band members, they have the same instruments, and they have the same types of recordings. And that's okay. I have no argument against it. But for me, if I'm going to Brazil or Cuba or Nicaragua or Argentina or Sicily or Greece or, Yugoslavia or, or whatever, I want to extract from the culture and learn something from somebody, from a scholar, from some renowned musicians, and take that back, take some CDs back, study them, analyze, decrypt, decode it, extract, and then try to apply it, and then try to personalize it so that it sounds more like a Greg Osby thing, as opposed to me just biting the culture.
Yeah.
So there has to be some midpoint, some kind of collaborative, conception. And so that's kind of where that went. I mean, I like to find band members who will dedicate themselves to, some of my alternative and somewhat unorthodox approaches to composition. Sometimes it's not always, within the parameters of what people think is traditional. Even though I'm not inventing any new notes or any new notation, but it's just the organization may be different, and the interpretation, the execution may be a little bit altered. And so I have to explain things a little bit so that people won't resign themselves or just default to licks and bebop playing or things that they memorize and something that they always do. I want people to think in the moment. So therefore, there may be some constructs or, some parameters or limitations or things that I want that are specific to these compositions that force people into this. Okay, now you have to do this, or it's going to be very wrong.
So if you give a person a lead sheet, like you give them, then you tell them, like, let's say, how to approach it, or
but a lot of times the lead sheets my lead sheets don't have chord symbols. They have voicings.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, because if you give somebody a fixed voicing, well, then they're going to default to a lick that they know. But if you give them a voicing that has the addition or the deletion of certain things, then they have to interpret it and figure out what that is and figure out how to get from that to the next zone or the next structure. So then, people, they write shorthand. They may write chord symbols on it anyway, but it is, and sometimes it isn't that. But the beauty of it is that everybody will interpret it differently. A guitarist will say, well, this is, that's one. So within a vibraphone player, well, no, I think it's this. And then the pianist will say, no, I think it's this. This will guarantee that they're going to play something different, And even when I'm recording, I don't look at a transposed saxophone part. I'm looking at the piano score. So I'm transposing a 2-stave piano score in time, in the moment, so that I have to be immediate. I have to be on it.
Why did you start doing that? I mean,
to prevent myself from playing Charlie Parker licks.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, or anybody's licks. Or I don't want to do that. I want to be thinking. I want my clock's gears to be moving, to be ticking always. I want it to in the moment.
Yeah.
And as a result, most of the time, during my recordings, the first take with the mistakes is the best one, because that's the one that's the most honest.
Yeah.
So usually, I don't do any more than 2 takes anyway. I don't like, take 8, take 9, take 15.
Yeah, man, that's terrible. Yeah.
People, they do that just because, you can multi-track and you can fix things, but it loses the spirit. It loses the immediacy. It loses, the humanity. So a lot of, my recordings, what you may hear some mistakes. So what I'll go back and change the notation to adhere to the mistake. So now that's the new, because, during rehearsals, sometimes my band members, they'll keep making the same mistake in the same place. So I'm saying, well, since your fingers, or, default to that all the time, then that's the gravity pulling you in that area. So I'll just modify this tune, to fit what you were doing naturally, and then it'll sound much more organic. I'm not a tyrant. It's not like it has to be this and it can't change. I don't like that. And I got that from Jack DeJohnette. Jack is very, very flexible, very liberal, and he allowed us to play our own original tunes. He allowed me to record my own original tunes. And if I played something hip, he would say, "Oh man, that was great, man. Yeah, do that. That's better than, keep that in there, So, I like that approach to band leading. You get people for what they bring to the music, not, to be your slaves and to follow you and to be robots with no personality, And that's why I like playing with people who are not well known. So a lot of my recordings, a lot of my touring bands have been people that nobody ever heard of in the moment.
I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah.
Then 6 months later,
yeah,
they become the new stars on the scene.
Yeah.
Because in my environment, it's probably the first time they were ever able to perform without any chains, without any limitations, or bindings, Yeah, I probably would only have a problem if they're messing up a lot. But if there's some small mistakes, I'm tolerant of that because that's human, and I know that it'll get better. That's fine for me. But I like to find either students, during my master classes or when I tour and do workshops, or people send me MP3s, over the internet, and stuff comes in my email like every day. If somebody want me to listen to something, and I try to listen to most of it, practically all of it. And there's some amazing talent in this world that nobody ever heard of.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And they need a chance, just like I had a chance.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask you about this, like finding young players. Like, I think it was on your website, or you years ago you uploaded gigs, right? I think I downloaded like 98, 97, that period. I think I have those gigs.
Yeah.
I listened to that stuff a lot. And, you had like young Eric Harland, Rodney Green, or
Jason
Moran, Matt Brewer. I think
all
these guys.
Well, see what happened, the demand for downloading was so great that the server crashed because people were downloading from all over the world. And it's just like, But see, I got that idea from touring with the Grateful Dead because they allow people to tape their concerts. Yeah. And I guess the only stipulation, for them is that people don't sell it. They encourage people to trade them. And so I said, Phil, man, so people are recording. He said, yeah, people have been recording us since 1967. Those are the traders. Those are the tapers. And so that gave me the idea to put some stuff on my website. And interestingly enough, when I did that, the legitimate CD sales increased because people, as I guess as a thank you for letting me letting them download live recordings, they started to buy my CDs more. So, Bruce Lundvall, the president of Blue Night, what happened? Blah, blah, blah. I said, man, I'm letting people, download live recordings. And it went really well for, over a year, but then the server crashed and I had to get a new, internet server, and I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, I love that. I'm
going to upload a whole lot of stuff. I have a whole lot of PDFs of scores, and, I have video of just, talking to people from way back in the 80s, the late 80s when I first got my first camcorder. And, I would sit around, with Steve Coleman or Marvin Smith or Gary Thomas or Jerry, and we would just talk about music. I think all this stuff needs to be shared. It needs to go up. It needs to be, disseminated. And there's a lot of good information. There's stuff that you won't find in any book.
Yeah.
How, the process, how people think, how people put together their music, what the influences are, the books that they're reading, the food they're eating, what they do for fun. All this factors into a person's personality, which is mirrored by their art.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a really great window into the minds of a lot of wonderful people.
Oh man, yeah, we do. Please share. I love you.
But my issue is that I need help. I need somebody to help me transfer the stuff because I have stuff on VHS, I have stuff on Betamax, I have stuff on every possible format. I have boxes of cassettes. I have all this video. So, and I need to have it converted to a digital format, to MP3s as well as video files. And I have to find somebody who has the equipment or the time to do that because I can't do it all myself. That's been the issue. That's been the issue.
Man, if you need to convert from CDs to MP3s, I can help you. I have only a CD player still, but yeah. Oh, man, it's would be amazing if this stuff comes out. It's just
Sure.
so much knowledge there.
It's necessary.
Yeah, Greg, I just wanted to ask, and not to take too much of your time. Like, you mentioned Blue Note, and what was the main trigger then that you decided to make Inner Circle music? And considering, you were with a really big label recording, and then you decided to go on your own. What was the main trigger for that? I mean, obviously the artistic control, but still, I think you had that when I had at the records on Blue Note.
Well, there were several factors. One was because the environment or the climate around the record company started to change. They started to hire some people in administration who really didn't know my history, or for me, it felt like they weren't even fans of music, because I would go out into the offices and stuff, and there would be no music playing. I would hear people playing Nirvana and Soundgarden and stuff like that, and they would look the same. They would have flannel shirts and stuff, and they would look like Kurt Cobain or whatever. I said, people aren't really listening to instrumental, improvised music. And I would come there, successive times, and they wouldn't even know my name. There would be no connection, no recognition. So I'm like, man, this is just a job to these people. They don't really love the music. And also, at the time, Blue Note, they started to sign some artists that I won't say I didn't want to be associated with, but I could see a shift was taking place. They signed Al Green, they signed Anita Baker, they signed Van Morrison. They had already signed Norah Jones, and she was, kind of the queen of the label at that point. She sold so many records. So I said, I see where this is going. They're going to move in a more contemporary direction. And I'd already been there 16 years. That's a long time to be with a record. Okay. 16 years with no label intervention. They let me do whatever I want to do. I had global distribution. And so I won a big artist grant. I was awarded a big grant, and that afforded me, the resources to start my own imprint. So that was another thing. And also, touring with Phil Lesh and friends, the Grateful Dead and all that stuff. I would just see how many or how much product they would sell at the merchandise table. I mean, boxes and boxes of CDs. It was incredible. I mean, how big their audiences are, man. It could be like 20, 30,000 people, at their audiences. And they would just sell like all this. I'm like, wow, man, they're selling more at one concert than I've sold for the whole,
Yeah.
So he said, well, yeah, why don't you bring some of your CDs? So I was selling my CDs at their merchandise table.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I would buy CDs, and I'm talking about boxes and boxes of CDs. And I was just up there playing saxophone, with this, esteemed, rock group. And I'm saying, wait a minute. And see, these are CDs that I bought to sell for myself. So I was getting 100% of the return. And I say, well, I'm selling these CDs, but I don't own this product.
Yeah.
Blue Note owns it. And I said, I've done all these recordings for them, but I don't own any of them. And I said, man, there's something wrong with this math. This equation just isn't sitting well. So, that and the environment changing at the label, me having a really good run. And also the president, Bruce Lundvall, was retiring. And he was my champion. I mean, I only talked to him, only answered to him. He came to see me whether I was playing with my band or not. He just was a big fan of mine. I could be playing with Michelle Rosewoman or anybody, and he would come to see it. We talked on the phone. He was a big fan of men's fashion. So we talked about suits and ties and, watches and things, that kind of thing. And he, and comedy and stand-up comedy. He was a big fan of that kind of thing. I know a lot of comedians, So we had a lot of common interests and stuff. So he was leaving, And so I said, well, if my man is not going to be here, there's no point in me being here, because whoever they bring in here, I know that there's probably going to be some conflict. I know there's probably not going to be, it probably would, but I was right because a lot of the people who were on the label, my friends that were on the label, they left after Bruce left because things changed.
Yeah.
And that's evolution. Things happen that way. So I started the imprint, and I sought out some people who already had good music. They had some momentum as artists. They were gigging a little bit, but they weren't widely known or really well known. So I handpicked some people, and so it became, like an inner circle, because some of them were former students and some of them were people who came to me for business advice or for touring information or for legal advice. So it was kind of a circle of people who, looked to me for what they needed. So that gave it that. But it was really fashioned after my recording called Inner Circle, which was, Jason Moran and Stefon Harris and Mark Shim and Nasheed and Eric Harland and Tarus Mateen. We toured, with this Blue Note band to celebrate, I guess, the 40th anniversary of Blue Note or 50th anniversary or something like that. And I was the elder in that band. So it all made sense. And it's been going well. I'm still doing it. It's kind of a boutique label because I have to keep it contained. Because if I signed everybody that sent me something, I would have, 50,000, recordings, and I don't have the infrastructure to do that. So I have to be selective, and put out things that I really like, of people who I really respect. And I can't be all things to all people, but I wish I could. I wish I had a whole factory, a whole big building, and 100 employees, and because there's so much great stuff that I hear. I just wish everybody had a shot.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Greg, just to finish, like you said, a new record is coming out. This year, and are you planning a tour maybe next year in Europe? Or
that's already in the works.
Okay.
I'm going to promote this recording. The working title is called Minimalism, meaning ridding myself of all the disposable means and things that aren't important, things that weigh me down, things and people, who, either are, just along for the ride or disloyal or taking advantage, or who just want to siphon me for resources but are non-reciprocal. So you kind of have to pare things down and strip away all the superfluous content, So, and again, like I said, it's more of a composer's record. It's me putting myself in an environment that really details where my head is right now after, a lengthy hiatus.
Interesting you say that it's a composer's record. I thought of you. Every record of yours is a composer's record. Maybe it's my external view, but like,
but I mean,
it's such a strong part of.
But the emphasis isn't on the solos.
Okay.
The emphasis is on the environment, and the songs and the story. And each song represents a chapter, and it shows in vivid detail, kind of, what's happening with me. And it's probably one of the most honest recordings I've done, because I didn't have a deadline. I have 15 years to put it out, even though all the material is new. Now I'm sitting on a pyramid of undocumented works, because I've always recorded. I have so much really good stuff. So the next few years, we'll see, sometimes maybe 2 or 3 recordings a year, or some things, digital only, put out singles. I just want to share, because I think a lot of the stuff is good. And it's interesting, and then I think it may encourage some people, to investigate, or it may encourage them to do something similar. I just, if I can be a catalyst, for exploration, experimentation, or that's fine for me. I just want people to be honest and to be true to self, in their. In their artistic expression. It's really important. It's really important for the people to be transparent in that respect, because I hear so many great players, but they sound like other great players. And while it's an achievement in and of itself, it's also disappointing because I think that they're falling short of their potential. So
nicely put. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Sir, thank you so much for sharing some of these thoughts, man. I really appreciate it.
I'm honored, to have the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you're in Europe next year, I'll definitely try to catch you and have a beer together or a glass of wine or something. So.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll reach out in advance. Let you know if I'm anywhere nearby.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks so much.
Right.
And stay so strong. And I'll let you know when this one is out. So I'll send you a link and everything. So.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye. You too. Ciao.